got an orangutan problem, Mr. Grant.
Boy, if Dad ever finds out that we checked Dunston to the hotel, we'd be in big trouble.
Are you ready for some monkey business? Because it's time for Dunston Checks In. Oh my goodness. What is Dunston Checks In, you ask? Well, it's a family film that was released in 1996, distributed by 20th Century Fox, and directed by Ken Kwapis? Kwapis? What? Alright, so with a name like that, I had to look him up. And I'm sad to say I haven't seen many of his movies, but I am very familiar with his television work. He produced and directed episodes of some of the greatest shows ever, like ER, The Office, Parks and Rec, along with some of my personal all-time faves like The Bernie Mac Show, Malcolm in the Middle, and even Freaks and Geeks. So at least we know this movie's in pretty good hands. Anyway, what's Dunston Checks In about? In short, it's about a kid and an orangutan who get into a bunch of shenanigans at the Majestic, which is a 5-star hotel in none other than New York City. And I'm gonna be honest, before I actually watched this, I kind of just assumed that the kid was Dunston and he just has a wacky monkey sidekick, but no, I was so wrong. What Dunston Checks In is really about is the 90s. This might actually be the most 90s movie ever. Not that it's like all up in your face with big bold 90s nostalgia and references, but more so that it's just saturated with every 90s movie cliche and trope imaginable. First of all, why were filmmakers at this time so obsessed with primates? I mean, they have always been a part of cinematic history, I guess, with like OG King Kong being an icon, and there's like 50 Planet of the Apes movies. But never was there a more concentrated dose of movie monkey madness than in the 90s. Just to name a few, we had Monkey Trouble, Baby's Day Out, Ed, which is about a baseball-playing monkey, I guess, Born to be Wild, Congo, Buddy, George of the Jungle, which is legit one of my favorite like childhood movies, Mighty Joe Young, MVP, which stands for Most Valuable Primate, and we definitely cannot forget the best of the worst classic, Shakma.
And Shakma, shocking audiences everywhere.
Man, I guess they were just monkeying around. And we are just getting started with the 90s tropes that this film features. First of all, we have a kid living in a hotel in New York City, a la Home Alone 2. There are kids using walkie-talkies, and rollerblading. There's a funny little dog, of course. There's an evil British villain. And this guy is constantly smoking, too. I feel like this was the last era that you can get away with that, especially in a kid's movie. You got a single dad trying his best to balance his family and work life.
Sorry, Jamie. Look. Call Kyle and apologize for me.
Played by none other than Jason Alexander, who was also at the time starring in the biggest show of the 90s, Seinfeld. You might have heard of it. This movie also uses a lot of funny fat guy humor, which was very much a thing at the time. Usually done the best by people like the late great Chris Farley. And this was not just in comedy movies. No. This was even in some of the biggest blockbusters of the decade. Jurassic Park, you might have heard of it. And then there's everyone's favorite 90s trope, the 90s kid. I wouldn't even say there's a concrete definition of what makes a 90s kid, but they probably have either a bowl cut or longer hair that's parted in the middle. They're definitely rocking some boots, a flannel or a jean jacket, bonus points for a windbreaker. They love basketball, and either skateboarding or rollerblading. And they are definitely really into computers and hacking and stuff. But if there's one thing 90s kids love more than anything, it's causing a whole lot of trouble. The tone was basically set by John Connor from T2, and young Macaulay Culkin in like everything. And the decade just kind of ran with it.
Easy money.
I mean, I was even a 90s kid who had an ape-related adventure in New York City. It just kind of happens, you know? And this movie goes the extra mile and gives us not one, but two 90s kids. Our young protagonist, Kyle, and his older brother, Brian.
So am I still grounded?
That's my boy.
So what actually happens in this film? It starts with something you don't see much nowadays. An opening credit sequence. I kind of really miss them. When they're done right, they get you settled in and set the tone for the movie. Here we get to see the fancy hotel staff readying everything to exquisite perfection, showing us that this is a quality establishment, and basically the last place that would want some monkey mayhem. This leads into some character intros. We see Kyle and Brian up to some 90s kid mischief, which of course involves walkie-talkies, rollerblading, and tons of fat people falling. Hilarious. There's this opera singer lady who's just like always singing for no reason. Like, what?
She weighs about 1,000 pounds.
That's a physical impossibility. And stay focused, we're on a mission here.
Because of all these opening shenanigans, George Costanza, who is the kid's dad and manager of the hotel, has to smooth things over with this guy and his dog.
His name is Neil, after Neil Armstrong.
Who both end up being major side characters and endless sources of comedy. And I think Jason Alexander is like legit good in this, and I love how he's really a good dad who's like trying his best, but these kids will just not stop causing trouble.
You're both grounded.
What? Well, if you gotta be grounded, a 5-star hotel is the place to be.
Older 90s kid goes to max some babes, and Kyle starts messing around with some luggage until he's interrupted by its owner, Rutledge.
Lord Rutledge.
I'm sorry, Lord Rutledge. The main antagonist of this film.
I can make nosy little boys disappear.
What kind of lord is this guy anyway? A Sith Lord? I mean, he's certainly evil enough to be one. Well, we soon find out that he's actually a crime lord, because he's at the front desk and this thirsty rich lady starts flirting with him, and we see that he's only interested in one thing, her jewelry. He's a thief. And his PIC is none other than our main monkey. Okay, he's actually an orangutan, I know, whatever.
Pongo pygmaeus.
They kind of have a cute, funny relationship at first.
It'll stunt your growth. Now give it back.
But then we see that he's actually really cruel. And you start to really feel bad for Dunston right off the bat.
Spare the rod and spoil the monkey.
And then there's a Dubrow alert.
Dubrow alert. Dubrow alert. Dubrow alert.
Dubrow alert.
Dubrow alert.
Dubrow alert.
Dubrow alert.
Dubrow alert.
Dubrow alert.
Lobby 3 degrees too cold. Doorman slow to open car door. 2 crushed butts in ashtray number 1. Make that 4 degrees too cold. Victor.
Mrs. Dubrow is the owner of the hotel and our secondary villain of the movie. She's mildly racist.
Consuelo.
And...
She doesn't like kids. She wants to kick Big Bird in the nuts.
Wait, so does that mean Big Bird's real in this movie? Like... Or did she kick someone who was in a Big Bird costume? I don't know. What's more likely is that this joke came from Ken Kwapis since he worked with Big Bird in the past. Anyway, Dubrow tells Costanza that the hotel is up for a prestigious 6th star, and there is a secret undercover guest who is there to review them, and everything must go perfectly or else he's out of a job. This scene ends in a bizarre joke because the whole time that they've been talking, Kyle has been hidden away under the desk because apparently Mrs. Dubrow hates children so much that she can't even be in the same room as one. And of course, Jason Alexander has been trying to like awkwardly shut him up the whole time and keep him hidden. And it's, you know, it's hilarious. And she doesn't seem to notice. But as they're leaving, Mr. Dubrow turns around and just casually says,
"By the way, there's a small boy under your desk."
I don't know, that really made me crack up the first time I saw it. Here's another weird random scene. So that night, Dunston robs the rich lady's room. Meanwhile, at the same time, Kyle is walking that guy's dog. When the dog smells Dunston, I guess, who's like hanging onto the outside of the building. And I'm not kidding, he just randomly jumps off the roof.
Suicidal? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
He jumped over.
Don't worry though, he's fine because he lands in a dumpster.
What happened?
Well,
Now, show Daddy what you've got.
So Lord Rutledge meets back up with Dunston to get the spoils of the robbery, But when Dunny is goofing around too much, he gets impatient and threatens to kill him like he killed his brother. Holy crap, that is dark. This guy is evil. And that's the last straw for Dunston. He's out of here. Meanwhile, Dubrow sees Lord Rutledge on the security cameras searching for his ex-partner and just somehow concludes that he must be the undercover guest that they're expecting to raid the hotel. Later on, Kyle has to take a midnight whiz, and during that he has an encounter with Dunston, who's moving around through the heating shafts like he's a xenomorph or something. But what really bothers me about this scene is that we see him peeing with his left hand and holding Spider-Man with his right, but then he finishes, switches Spider-Man to his other hand, flushes, doesn't seem to wash his hands, and goes back to bed with all that up against his face. Ew! The next day, the 90s kids try to find Dunston, but he ends up finding them, and then Rutledge,
Lord Rutledge,
oh, excuse me, finds all of them. I don't really think you could fall all the way down this shaft and just be fine, even if you land in laundry. Anyway, it's about time for some more funny fat guy humor, so Dunston sneaks into the hotel's health club and messes with Spaulding, our favorite target. Hilarious. And the movie just couldn't resist a joke where the thirsty rich lady is getting a massage, and when the massager steps out for a minute, Dunston comes in and starts going ape on her, and she's like, "Wow, this is the craziest massage ever!" Hilarious. Also, it was around this time that I noticed that Dunston kind of walks funny. Kyle tries to tell his dad that there's a monkey on the loose and that Lord Rutledge is a bad dude, but he ends up kissing up to the Lord instead because he's under the impression still that he's the secret guest and he wants to keep his job.
Your son, sir, is behaving like a lunatic.
We then get like a genuinely touching moment where Dunston gets a little taste of freedom. I don't know, I just think this scene's kind of cute. And then George Costanza finally sees him and like believes his son that there's a monkey on the loose and calls in an animal control expert. Enter Paul Reubens. Oh my goodness, if this movie couldn't get any weirder, we get Pee Wee Herman himself. And his character, of course, is ridiculously strange.
You ever been in the sewers of this city, Mr. Grant? Well, I have. I could tell you stories.
Go on, get off.
So we have a little shootout, and Dunston escapes the jungle area of the hotel, but it looks like he didn't get out unscathed. Is that blood? Yeah, there's like a blood trail going up the stairs, and the first time I saw this, I was like, holy crap, did Dunston get shot somehow? Like, is he gonna die? Like, I don't know, I just didn't know where this movie was going with it. But no, he just has some glass in his hand from the window. The kids do some surgery, and Kyle sings to him to keep him calm. Aww.
Happy birthday.
I initially and kind of cynically figured that he chose to sing Happy Birthday because I believe you can use that without paying any licensing fees or whatever. But then he does the monkey verse and I was like, ah, that makes sense. You got me, movie.
It's like when you get a shot. Or broccoli. It's better if you don't look at it. Look at me, Dunston. Look at me. It's gonna be okay.
Got it.
Aw, like seriously, this movie's starting to really tug on my heartstrings.
Dad might be a little preoccupied, but I think he's gonna notice an orangutan in your room. Wait a minute. We have lots of rooms.
Oh yeah, and guys, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. This is the part of the movie where Dunston finally checks in, an hour into the movie. They get him a suite and they have an absolute ball, tossing some frisbee, ordering a bunch of food, and taking a bubble bath. Okay. We saw him smoking before, but now Dunny gets his drink on as well. And if you pay attention in the background, Big Bro takes a swig too. Don't you just love underage drinking in a family movie? And then this happens. And ah man, the first time I saw this, it almost killed me. I laughed harder than I have in a long time.
Well, Dunston, frisbee may not be your game.
Mrs. Dubrow, I can assure you that there will be no further incidents. As of this moment, they are both on their best behavior.
Oh yeah, and I guess I forgot to mention that throughout the movie, they keep mentioning this big fancy upcoming ball. And yeah, that's finally happening. While George Costanza makes sure that every little detail is perfect. Lord Rutledge hacks into the system and learns where Dunston is by looking up which rooms have ordered an unusual amount of bananas through the room service records. Genius. Absolutely genius.
Well, Dr. Nagok, either you've got a potassium deficiency or I think we might be in business.
And this guy is so sinister. He kidnaps them, and he ties up Kyle in a bathtub, and he tries to murder Dunston. But then he gets Mike Tyson and they escape again. So then things basically all come to a head at the big fancy ball. The villains are looking for Dunston. Brian is macking on more babes, and Kyle shows up with evidence to expose the evil Lord Rutledge as the one behind the robbery. There's of course more funny fat guy humor. And Dunston is briefly caught again, but then quickly escapes. Again. Anyway, yada yada yada. Costanza duels with Lord Rutledge in the kitchen while Faye Dunaway tries to calm the guests. Kyle karate chops Pee-wee to stop him from shooting Dunston, and of course it instead hits the funny fat guy in the butt. Hilarious. Rutledge is defeated, and it all ends with Dubrow getting pushed into a gigantic cake. And on top of all that, it turns out that the secret guest there to review them was that funny fat guy all along, and he's not inclined to award them that 6 star after his incredibly disastrous stay. I have to think that George Costanza took a moment to reflect on how epic of a failure this whole ordeal was. Don't worry though, the movie has a happy ending. Instead of getting fired, George somehow just gets transferred to the Majestic Hotel in Bali. Dunston gets to come too. And yeah, there it is. Everyone lives happily ever after. Except for that fat guy and his dog, of course.
Which we offer every day at breakfast and lunch. In addition, our native chef Isabel.
How was the play?
Delightful. Haven't said that word in months.
I guess the real question now would be, is Dunston Checks In actually any good? And honestly, I can't tell if I've oversold it or undersold it. I wouldn't say it's like a lost gem or anything, but it entertained me enough to make a whole video about it. I genuinely liked Jason Alexander as Robert. He's a great actor, and I know I was kidding around by calling him George Costanza the whole time, but he's like legitimately good as like the 90s dad in this movie. I really liked its solid, whimsical score by Miles Goodman. I liked the wacky cast of side characters. Say what you will about his personal life, but I was happy to see the late great Paul Reubens. I watched a lot of Pee-wee when I was little, and it's always good seeing him show up in things. Also, I know I made light of him a lot, but Glenn Shaddix was really good as this guy. I knew he looked familiar when I first saw him, and yeah, it turns out he's a talented character actor who's been in like tons of movies. I mean, Faye Dunaway too, she's an absolute pro. She's hamming it up a bit in this movie, but she's doing a great job. And what do I think about Dunston himself? Well, full disclosure, I am not the biggest fan of monkeys and apes and whatnot. I don't know, something about them has always just kind of freaked me out. But I will admit that he's pretty cute. He's a pretty good actor too. There's a part where he looks at a photo of his dead brother, and he has this real sadness in his eyes, and it kind of got me. He was played by Sammy the orangutan, who retired shortly after this role because he was getting too big and strong to safely work on movies anymore. And yeah, look, he grew up into this big guy. Talk about a great ape. And one more little fun fact. So this dog, Neil, is voiced by none other than Frank Welker, the legendary voice actor. He did Scooby-Doo, he did Godzilla. He's done like 8,000 different voice roles. I don't know why they needed him to go woof woof a couple times, but kudos to the movie for once again just going above and beyond. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like Dunston Checks In. It's not the best thing ever, but it's in my opinion much better than a movie like this needed to be. If you get a kick out of these old-fashioned wacky 90s comedies, but want one with a little more heart and oddness than usual, I say check out Dunston Checks In.
It was never boring.